This is the BBC.
Dear brothers and sisters, all are welcome here at the Confessions podcast, whether saint or sinner.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome. It's the Confessions podcast from the BBC. I feel like a jingle right now.
88 to 91 FM, BBC Radio 2.
That's my favourite. That's ID Wow.
ID Wow.
Remember to ask for it by name. Anyway, a welcome to our new subscribers who may or may not have been bribed with the offer of a drive time car sticker or unwittingly subscribed by a loved one. How did I get this on my phone? Where did this come from? Anyway, bear with us. More on that later. If this is your first time, Confessions is where the sinful members of the Radio 2 audience gather to tell their tales of deceit, debauchery and deception. And there's lots of it. They all seek dispensation from Sister Bobby. You don't want to mess with her, as we've learnt. And Brother Matt, who's a bit of a feeble pushover and wears a beret
What?
during the week.
He does.
And sometimes a cape.
Oh, please.
This week's collection features Mixed Confession, The Road to Yell, Andrew's Terrible Tale, Good Golly This Trolley, probably the best title, Sam's Silly Story, Little White Stripe Lies, which is working a little bit harder, I think. We'll start this week's podcast with Adrian's Tale, Keep on Running, No G.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast. Please be seated.
Father Simon and the Collective. I feel the need to confess a heinous act of stupidity and a moment of madness. It started back in 2017 when out for a drink with my brother-in-law called Simon. After a few drinks, he announced he'd got a place in the Great North Run. And in my semi-relaxed state, I think I said something like, "You know, that's something I always thought I should do." I definitely didn't say, "That sounds great, any chance you could get me a place?" But it was too late. I knew what would be happening, so I quickly changed the subject and finished my drink, hoping that nothing more would be said and my brother-in-law would forget. However, my worst fears were realised when a month later I got a call from Simon saying he'd got me a place doing the Great North Run on behalf of the local hospice. I must admit I was terrified by the thought, and in my mind's eye I suddenly saw a Rocky training montage with me as a chubby Rocky. That's me. Look at me run. Check out my spandex. Working it hard. And sweating like a good one. Anyway, after a few weeks of tears and pain, the training did actually get better, and I thought it'd be a good idea to enter the... Good fade there. It was a good idea to enter the Durham 10K as a little bit of a practice. This is a very wise thing. It'd be good practice, I figured, and a good indication of how well I was doing. Now, I've never done one of these runny type event thingies before. He's got all the lingo, Adrian.
Yeah.
But I have to say, it was great. Really well organised. Lots of people running around.
Yeah.
Really.
That's how it works.
And everyone was in a good mood and cheering you on. Apart from the running, it was actually quite enjoyable. Now, at the start of the race, I saw Steve Cram, racing superstar known as the Jarrow Arrow, who was local, of course, and I assumed was helping out with the run. I can't say he's a particular hero of mine, but I was impressed to see someone as famous as Steve Cram at this particular event. Durham is only a small place, so essentially the 10K was 2 laps of 5. After the first lap, I was flagging a bit, to be honest, and it was quite difficult struggling along and watching all the people who were only going to run 5K. They were separating off to finish the race. They looked very happy indeed. So I put my headphones in, I took my glasses off and settled in for the run. Not quite sure why you took your glasses off, but anyway, that is relevant.
Yeah.
As I was running up a bank, back towards the city, I could just make out someone stood at the side of the road, waving his arms around. Flapping his arms would be more accurate, but the arms were aloft. As I made my way up the bank, I could see it was in fact the aforementioned Jarrow Arrow, Steve Cram, holding his palms in the air. I couldn't hear anything he was shouting, as I had my music blasting away. If you want to know, it was the best of Enya that I was running to.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you run to that?
Well, you run slowly and methodically.
Sailing away, yeah.
And rather short-sightedly by the sounds of it.
Anyway, so that's what was happening. Now, all I can remember thinking as I headed towards one of Britain's greatest ever runners, if you remember, the first man to do 1,500 metres in under 3.5 minutes.
There you go.
There you go. That's how good Steve Cram is/was. All I remember thinking as I headed towards Steve was, that Steve Cram, he looks desperate for a high five.
Yeah, he does.
That's what he's doing. He's always drawing attention to himself. I made a beeline towards Steve, excited by the fact that I would be high-fiving someone that famous. You know, the guy, first man to do 1,500 metres in under 3:30. Did I mention that?
Kenya.
As I got closer, I could see that Steve was gesticulating more and more, but I still didn't really register what was happening. I just remember thinking that maybe he'd not received as many high fives as he'd been hoping for from runners, and I took pity on him. So I went running up, and it was only at the point that I held out my left hand, raised high and firm, a big smile on my face, that I felt my outstretched arm being violently shoved out of the way, that the penny finally dropped. As seasoned runners will know, these events are set up quite well. And there are paramedics or St John's ambulance guys dotted around the course. I mention this because, unbeknownst to me, there'd been a small accident, and what Steve was actually doing was gesturing for people to move over and shouting, "Get out of the way! Get out of the way!" And make way for the paramedics, he was shouting, that were coming up behind me. I was so embarrassed I went bright red, did the only responsible thing I could think of, which was, I ran away, shouting my apology. Therefore, I feel I need to seek forgiveness from everyone, really, but not Steve Cram, who, quite frankly, was begging for a high five.
Of course he was, yeah.
And he was a bit shouty. Mainly, though, I asked forgiveness from the person that was injured and in need of medical attention, but also to the paramedic on a bike who was apparently trying to get past me, but I was doing the clothesline. Anyway, you'll be relieved to know, because I know Sister Bobby will be concerned about such things, that everyone was fine afterwards, so no sympathy needed for the collapsed and feeble. So anyway, that's the tale of Adrian, who ran the 5K in training for the 10K and mistook Steve Cram, the Jarrow Arrow, as you know, first man to do 1,500.
Yeah, that one.
In under 3:30. He wasn't trying to get a high five, Adrian. He was trying to say, "Get out of the way, you fool." Anyway, Sister Bobby, what you got?
Oh, this is lovely, this is. You put your spandex on and you ran and you kept running and you kept running. And let's face it, you didn't have your glasses on. It's easily mistaken, and that's absolutely fine. So I think I can very, very, very easily forgive this moment of stupidity, as you call it.
Yeah, well,
Easy.
Absolutely was. Nigel?
You know, I don't often, Bobby, we are in accord. Not today. I don't see Adrian as a spandex man for a start. And he's made himself deaf and blind on purpose, you know, and therefore the quickest he will have run all day was when he was running away from the Jarrah Arra. So you complete plonker. You know, you can't see where you're going. You can't hear anything. So Adrian, absolutely not forgiven.
Brother Matthew.
Well, yeah, I mean, I do a bit of running, and I'm the same. I need to listen to music. I prefer a bit of AC/DC and The Maiden rather than Enya. But you know, each to their own. I think there's an interesting postscript here. Oh, bit of that. That's what I was really. Yeah.
You're getting good at this, Simon.
Yeah,
You should take it up full time.
Is why Cram got a bit shouty. I'd like to know more details of Steve Cram getting a bit shouty after he's knocked Adrian away. So, yes, I'm definitely going to forgive, because, you know, we'd have all done it.
The Confessions Podcast.
Father Simon, I offer my confession to the collective in the hope that perhaps some compassion towards me might be forthcoming, and that just maybe, possibly, maybe, the person concerned hears this and they might forgive me too. For most of my 30 years service to Her Majesty, I was a road traffic motorcycle cop. For this incident takes us back to 1994, just a couple of years before I retired. Now, I firmly believe that a little fun and humour went a long way towards being a good traffic cop. However, knowing when to do so and when not was paramount. Let me explain. I was on my police bike, all big and white with a red stripe. I was a fine sight in my black leathers. But as this was pre-health and safety, no day-glow jackets then. On the warm and balmy afternoon in question, I travelled into the police HQ in Sheffield. I was returning back towards Rotherham along the A630 Sheffield Parkway. Traffic was slowing on the two-lane dual carriageway, meaning there was a problem ahead, and I realised I needed to go get it sorted if at all possible, because that's what the traffic cops do. So I eased my way through the two lanes of slow, sometimes stationary traffic. No need for the blues and twos, this wasn't that urgent. I just weaved outside, down the middle, sometimes up the near side. Here we go, this is good. Some drivers saw me in their mirrors and moved to make way for me, and I would raise my hand in acknowledgement or thank them as I rode past. As I mentioned, it was a warm afternoon. The windows were, for the most part, open. Again, I saw a slow-moving lorry in the near side lane. The road gently curved round to the left so that I could see up the near side of the lorry. It was then that I noticed that the female passenger was clearly lying on her back on the front passenger seat with her shoeless legs dangling out of the cab window. Ding! A light comes on and I had a crazy idea.
Okay.
Let's get some fun into this humdrum day, I thought. So I made my way towards the lorry, which was doing about 5 miles an hour maybe. I slowly moved up the near side of it, in total safety of course, and then screwed the throttle control friction device down a little, so I could now travel about 1 mile an hour faster than the lorry with my hand off the throttle. I reached up as I neared the female passenger's dangling legs, and with a gloved right hand...
Go on.
Grabbed one of her big toes and shook it vigorously up and down and then the other way for a couple of seconds before I had to let go. Her blood-curdling scream was long, loud and continuous. In fact, I could still hear the woman's terrified screams as I moved forward the lorry and regained the carriageway, looking to do what a traffic cop does best, go sort out the traffic. 5 minutes later, I came across another lorry, broken down in the near side lane. Hazard lights on, traffic was slow, no danger of traffic hitting the rear of the lorry as well-behaved motorists eased like a zip into the outside lane to pass. Well, they would behave, wouldn't they, with the traffic motorcycle cop in full view. Maybe I should have behaved too. I realised that I didn't do that. I pulled in front of the lorry, and the driver jumped out. He had indeed broken down, and his firm were on the case. ETA 20 minutes or so. A few minutes later, I heard a loud blast on an HGV horn and saw a lorry slowly coming past in the outside lane. It was the vehicle from a few minutes earlier, and the driver looked at me with a grin from ear to ear. He then nudged his now upright female passenger with his left elbow and pointed at me, then gave me a big thumbs up. However, his passenger's face didn't seem to be quite as amused. In fact, ashen would be the word I'd use, and she just glared at me. I think it's quite clear who I'm seeking forgiveness from, if she's listening, and heaven only knows what she thought. Could have grabbed her feet 6 or 7 feet up off the ground outside a moving lorry, but I can still hear her screams to this very day. If it helps you decide on whether or not to forgive me, then may I just say that I went on to complete my full 30 years of service, so it's down to you, dear collective, as to whether my career remained unblemished or not. Lots of love, Mick. P.S. I can still hear her scream now. Well, you can imagine, you're just taking it easy. It's quite warm. The windows are open. You're just going to stretch, put your feet out the window. It's probably not a very good thing to do. Anyway, and then all of a sudden, someone grabs your toes and gives it a twist. That's going to give anyone a shock. So this is Mick's confession. Mick, the travel cop. What do you say here, young Jules?
Well, I would say, obviously, firstly, maybe it's not the right thing for an officer of the law to be doing. Mm-hmm. However, so that's the serious side of it. However, he did start off the confession asking for us to be compassionate. Mm-hmm. And I am a pretty compassionate person. And I think that it sounds like a pretty good joke to me, and I'll forgive him.
See, I think it's delightful, Jules. You're a bit of a pushover in comparison, because Bobby would go.
That's why I qualified it at the beginning with what would probably have been a Bobby statement about the law. However, I don't really think that's breaking the law.
He is the law, isn't
he? Well, he is the law.
He is
so
representing the full body of the law.
Also, I love the ear-splitting grin on the driver's face. I think I would be the same, so I forgive him.
Yeah, there are a few questions about this tale, which I'm leaving you to ask yourself.
Yes, I think we all know where that's going.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I am going to forgive, and here's the reason why is, what is she doing dangling her feet out of the window? That doesn't sound like a safe way to travel in an HGV. And also, a little bit too fancy-free for me. I mean, come on, I'm not a Puritan, but really, we're going to be starting dangling our feet out of the window? I don't think so. Not on my watch, or indeed on Mick's watch, as it turned out. So, got what was coming to you. A little bit too flamboyant for my tastes. So, I am going to forgive.
Simon Mayo's Confessions Podcast.
That was Mick's toe-tugging confession, The Road to Yell. It's fair to say we had quite a bit of correspondence to that. Many of which I can't read out. Not even here.
Really?
We do need another podcast for the stuff that can't be put in the podcast, for the stuff that can't go out. Anyway, we did enjoy this message. G says, and the ex-bike cop, totally forgiven. I'm an ex-bike cop too, and I was always in trouble for something or other, and then I got sacked. I'm not surprised then.
Yes.
I'm quite sort of reassured about that. That was Jules, of course, because Bobby was...
Gallivanting.
Off somewhere else.
I was.
And
Can't tell you.
No.
anyway, still to come, the confession that when Bobby did finally turn up, she revealed what she's been doing with my leftover coffee cups.
Listen, I have to make some money somehow on the online auctions. Anyway, what I was gonna say
because
is-
they go
what-
for a fortune.
Yeah.
Funnily enough, there's a notice about clearing up your empty cups on the parish notice board, right beside loads of photographs of mobile phones displaying the Confessions podcast page. Now, while we love to see all this kind of photographic proof of you subscribing to the podcast, what we would really like to receive is pictures of you or whoever you're subscribing on behalf with the phone. So here's my aunt, Ginny,
Yes.
and this is me forcing her to subscribe
Against
to the
her
podcast.
will.
She wants nothing to do with it and has sworn blind she hates everything that you stand for. But
Brilliant.
tough luck, because she doesn't understand how her phone works. And while she wants to listen to The Archers,
Yes.
she's going to get this. Anyway, the way we get to see your joyous faces is when you realise your life has been completed by pressing that subscribe button. So see if you can take part. Now, Bobby, what amongst all these phone pictures has caught your attention?
Well, Lucy emailed in to say, Dear Holy Simon, Bobby and Matt.
Hi.
I'm a massive fan of the
I like
podcast,
her.
which I listen to every week multiple times.
Oh, yeah.
I've been seeing a girl called Zoe for a while and have recently signed her up to the podcast. By the way, please, can I have a car sticker?
Okay,
Of course.
yes.
And as she's signed up and undoubtedly listening, I was hoping you could do me a favour and ask Zoe if she'd like to be my girlfriend. So, Zoe, can you be Lucy's girlfriend?
I think she probably can be, but obviously I can't
Yes.
speak on her behalf.
Well, no
Shall we have
more
a vote on it?
pussyfooting around.
Shall we have a vote on it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, hands up if you think she should be the girlfriend.
I think she should give it a go.
That's three.
Why not?
All right.
Four.
What could go wrong?
Well, how long a list do you have? Anyway, thanks very much. We can do relationship counselling as well.
Yeah.
That's what we do here.
Qualified.
Anyway, Matt, what have you found from the parish notice board?
Well, Elsie and Lionel emailed from somewhere in the Bahamas.
Aye, aye.
Yeah, they say, we do love listening to your Confessions podcast. We really do. Picture the scene. We've just finished a wonderful day sailing in the beautiful clear waters. We've anchored in a picturesque spot off a perfect white sandy beach.
Wow.
Tidied everything away, and the sun is slowly sinking to the horizon. The rum punches are poured, the snacks are ready, and we're getting comfortable in the cockpit to watch the sun going down after a perfect day.
I think you're lauding it now.
Yes. How do we make this picture even more perfect? We listen to your podcast.
No, you invite us to come on your
Yes,
boat.
indeed. Well, there's and
For a
another.
week.
Here comes our problem, though. There are very few UK boats out here. After many embarrassing encounters with our neighbours in the anchorage, we have learnt the optimum distance to anchor from other boats, so they can't hear our uproarious laughter as we listen to the week's offering. Each week seems funnier than the last, so we've had to keep increasing the distance from the neighbours. Now, you've introduced the notice board and the one-liner X-rated confessions. It is becoming impossible to find an anchorage large enough to avoid being overheard.
It is fair to say we didn't think of this.
No, exactly. My request to you is to please stop making them so funny.
Oh, all right then.
Our side-splitting laughter seems to disturb the others greatly, and we're just waiting to be asked to leave. We have to stop the podcast while a wave of laughter engulfs us both. Of course, the whole confession then has to be replayed, which turns into a vicious circle. It can take hours, sometimes even days, for us to hear a whole podcast. So, in conclusion, we love your programme. The only two things from Radio 2 that we miss in the 3 years we've been sailing around the world is your confessions and Ken Bruce's pop quiz. But we do not want to be flung out of this wonderful country, so please tone it down.
What, just so that you guys can carry on living in the Bahamas?
Living the life of Riley on your sandy beaches, in your cockpit, on your yacht.
How tough is it for Elsie and Lionel, because it's just so funny and they keep on getting complaints? Sorry about that, Elsie. Sorry about Lionel. We'll see if we can be really rubbish from now on. And on our discussion of photos from people's phones, Jenny from Tyne Weir says, Dear Simon, my friend Sam Grist is not a believer in the healing powers of the Drive Time Confessions podcast. In other words, he said it's not very good. However, I said, no, Sam, it's the very best. And then my boyfriend Ben subscribed, even though he didn't know about it, to prove him wrong. Please see attached photographic evidence. Please can I have a car sticker? I really, really want one. And then Sam will have no choice but to accept the divine powers of the Confessional Collective whenever he gets in my car. I say yes. What say you, Bobby?
I say yes.
I say yes again.
I
So
say
that's-
yes.
And that's
3
4-0.
yeses. What?
No, I get 2.
Oh, do you?
I
That's
voted
how
twice.
democracy works,
Why
is
do
it?
you get 2?
Vote regularly, vote often.
Why do you get 2?
Because
Why?
it's got my name in
'cause
the
it's got the
Radio
names.
Times.
Yeah, but it still makes it unfair. Doesn't make it fair.
Who said anything about
You and me are going to rise up.
fair?
Bobby, that's what we're going to do.
Since when was it fair?
Sounds like my mum now.
Listen.
You're
there's
not my
nothing-
mum. You're
there's-
not my real mum.
No, I'm not. That's true.
One vote each.
Wow, this has gone down a route. Oh, I say.
There's nothing wrong with a spot of authoritarianism every now and again.
Really?
Okay.
Yeah, you just
Really?
need to be told what to do. Life would be so much simpler if you didn't have to vote all the time.
Yes.
Just
Looking
have
forward
this-
to this being taken out of context. Great.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Anyway, it has been conclusively proved that I'm not your real mum.
No.
No.
Or even your pretend mum.
No.
So that was an interesting look through the parish notice board, if
was.
slightly unconventional. But now for the section of the podcast where we publicly shame those confessors whose stories are so shameful that they're not fit for mainstream radio, but fine to have on a mainstream podcast.
Apparently.
Stories like Alan's, in which he and a friend are showing off in a vintage sports car, but then ends with Alan falling out of the moving vehicle into oncoming traffic. Amazingly, only suffering from ripped trousers,
Wow.
which is inherently a comedic
Yes.
principle, really. Still a terrible example to set, Alan, and that's not going to get on because, mucking around in traffic is just stupid.
It's not funny.
Definitely doesn't get on.
But ripped trousers.
Obviously very funny.
B from Bradford wins our That Could Have Gone Horribly Wrong award for his tale of his time at a Swiss boarding school. Apparently, B hated it so much that one morning he bricked up the door to the adjoining church,
To what? To
not,
the church?
not realising that the nuns were actually still inside.
He bricked up the nuns.
He bricked up the nuns in the church. It was 2.5 hours before anyone noticed the nuns were missing because, well, presumably they were being silent.
Yeah.
They can't really conduct much of a protest. They were probably shouting, miming, let us out. But they were nuns of a silent
Where'd you get all
order.
the bricks? This is great. How did that one get on?
I know, that would have been quite good, wouldn't
Yeah.
it? But, if in doubt, as a guiding principle, don't brick up nuns in a
No.
nunnery. If you don't like your school,
Life lesson.
have a word with your parents, maybe, or the head. And it's got nothing to do with the nuns. Jack wins our Most Disgusting Email of the Week award for his description of a heavy student night out that ended with him trying to out of a small window on a moving bus, facing a strong wind. It's fair to say the passenger in front wasn't amused.
Oh my goodness. Neither of those things that I've got in my head are a good idea.
The latest from the Vom Express.
Oh, lovely.
Running Jack a close second was Diane's story about the time she was caught short in a tent at a festival and had to use her daughter's potty.
What's wrong with that?
Well-
That sounds very good. That's very funny.
Well, apparently the potty wasn't deep enough.
Overflow.
Who'd have thought? I think that's quite
It could
inventive.
create a vacuum and get stuck as well. That's what-
Oh, I suppose
right.
that's
Yes,
also.
this is...
So, can you imagine being so that you think, I know, I'm just going to use
Yes.
my daughter's
Oh, no.
potty?
Must be filling up.
And Broken Moral Compass of the Week goes to Mr. If Only I Knew, official name, who somehow is looking for sympathy for the story where he left his heavily pregnant wife at home and ended up back at the house of two sisters he'd met in the local pub.
Right. Is that it? I mean,
That is actually it.
good. Right. Well, that's not on, obviously.
Mr. If Only I Knew, I hope you can feel the heat of our disapproval.
Bobby's face. Phew.
Can you make the sound of my face?
My face.
Your mum's face. Just to be clear, none of that is okay.
It's not.
Some of it, although the nuns one, pretty good.
Yes.
Mr. If Only I Knew, no, I don't think so. Your confessions, please, but think, before you send and you press that button, ask yourself this question. Is this actually suitable to be actually read at actual tea time? Is it? Is it? Confessions at bbc.co.uk if the answers to all of those are yes. Despite all the photographic proof of podcast subscription, we still have some of our fabulous Drive Time car stickers going spare. And a reminder that we will generously send you a bumper sticker if you can get another member of your family to subscribe to the podcast with some photographic proofs and your address, please. And you need to send that to confessions@bbc.co.uk. And if that other member of your family is an unwilling subscriber, more fun for us, really, and for them. It's like the U2 album when they just released it to your phone, whether you wanted it or not. We're going to do the same.
Yeah.
And we'll also send you one if you're the first to tweet the end of podcast code word, which you'll hear at the end of the podcast, because that's where it goes. Speaking of which, Dave, Craig, Sue, Lisa, many more stickers will be with you soon. And enough nonsense, back to the confessions, where we revisit Sam's story this week, Little White Stripe Lies. Little White Stripe Lies. Little White Stripe Lies. Little lies with the white stripes in.
The Confessions Podcast.
Father Simon and the Venerable Voices of Vindication. I think that's a new one. Puts you ahead already, Sam.
Yes.
My confession dates back to 2004, when, following the release of their fourth album, Elephant, the rock band The White Stripes were at the height of their fame. That summer, the band were on a UK tour to promote the album, and at the Empress Ballroom in Blackpool, the entire gig was to be filmed for a special live performance DVD. I was part of the film crew that day, based on the top floor, and it was an elaborate and expensive operation. I'd already briefed my section of the crew and had my essential piece of equipment with me, a trusty black indelible marker pen to label the used rolls of film. Different times, you see. I'd finished my setup about 30 minutes before the gig was due to kick off, so being a genuine fan of the band, I took my opportunity to disappear down to the merch vendors to buy one of the official T-shirts. On my way back upstairs to the tech room, I noticed something strange behind the balustrade, which was opposite the director's gallery. There appeared to be a dark, shadowy figure crawling along the carpet on their elbows. My immediate thought was that some superfan had managed to sneak past security and find their way into this restricted area. But as I rounded the corner, the figure came into view. I recognised the shaggy mop of hair and red trousers. It was Jack White. So
Wow.
He's there. Am I going to do a Jack White voice
Go
or not?
on. You know you want
Yes,
to.
go on.
No, I think he comes from Croydon.
Oh, really?
Don't tease us.
I did what anyone in my position would do. I dropped to the floor, assumed the commando crawl position, began working my way towards him on my elbows. Jack, what are you doing? I asked in a loud whisper. Oh, says Jack.
Ow.
I'm just watching the crowd filling up. I love that I can see them, but they can't see me. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was tempted briefly, but I decided... I chickened out.
Yeah.
Yes, this rock legend, this super cool superstar, was playing his own simple game of pre-concert peekaboo with his fans, watching through the balustrade unseen as the venue filled up. It was childlike, it was funny, and it was beautiful. Now, it's not usually the done thing for a crew member to ask the talent for an autograph, but here I was right next to Jack White, holding an official concert T-shirt in one hand and a black marker pen in the other. Sorry and everything, I say, but would you mind signing the T-shirt for me? I asked hesitantly. Sure thing, he said,
back.
suddenly remembering where he came from. Jack duly signed the T-shirt and I thanked him and wished him a good gig. You too, he replied.
Really? No.
He held out his hand, which I awkwardly semi-shook and semi-high-fived because we were both resting on our elbows. I then crawled away, leaving Jack in his secret vantage point. There was still little time left before the gig started, so I headed to the crew catering area to get a drink. I then spotted Meg White sitting at one of the tables, and as there was no crew members around to frown upon my fraternising, I took my chance and politely asked Meg if she would mind adding her signature next to Jack's, which she did with a smile. I thanked her and headed back to the tech room, buzzing with excitement that I'd somehow managed to get both their signatures on an official tour T-shirt. How cool was I? However, I should point out that I wasn't so much buzzing with excitement for myself as for my partner, who was an even bigger Stripes fan than me. The T-shirt was going to get me not only a lifetime of brownie points, but also rose petals would be strewn at my feet. Gold stars would be pinned to my chest and a wreath of victory placed on my head just underneath the glowing halo. But it was then that we got the call to move into position for the start of the gig. So I carefully folded the now priceless garment and hid it inside one of the flight cases where I knew no one else had any business looking. The gig kicked off and everything seemed to be going fine, with Jack starting like this. Where else would you start? We might have started at the beginning, but obviously they started with Seven Nation Army and everybody went crazy. But just then my headset crackled and I could just make out the alarmed voice of the director shouting something about a camera malfunction. I looked over to my left and sure enough, one of the camera operators was holding up his camera and shrugging his shoulders as if to say, nothing happening here. I made my way over to him as fast as I could, pressed a backup camera into his hands and made sure he was locked, loaded and filming again within seconds. I squeezed the button on my headset, told the director we were back up and running. Day saved. But as I sat thinking about how clever we were having a backup camera, my subconscious mind started to form a duplicitous idea. This is what I need redemption for. You see, Father Simon, the fact was, I now realised that I really did not want to give the signed T-shirt away, least of all to my partner at the time, who'd been extremely selfish during the previous few months. But what if I had a duplicate? 2 T-shirts, both signed by Jack and Meg. Surely then I'd not really mind if I was giving one away, and I could potentially score all the brownie points that were up for grabs. Problem was, I'd already had my moment with Jack and Meg, and at the end of the gig, I knew they'd disappear back to their hotel pretty sharpish. So how could I engineer this? Well, the gig reached its climax without any more technical hiccups, and while the rest of the crew were occupied packing away equipment, I retrieved the signed T-shirt from its hiding place and quickly headed down to buy another T-shirt. On my way back upstairs, I slipped into a side room, closed the door, laid both T-shirts out on a table. With my background in graphic design, I had no trouble using my black marker pen to copy both signatures very accurately onto the second T-shirt, and no one would ever know, least of all my selfish girlfriend. Next day, back in London, I'm unpacking equipment. I took the 2 T-shirts out of the flight case where they'd been safely stowed. And this, Father Simon, is where my wicked deed unravels before my eyes, because no matter how closely I looked, I simply couldn't tell which T-shirt was which. I'd done such a good job at my forgery, there was just no way to tell the difference. I reckon even Jack and Meg themselves wouldn't have been able to tell. When the weekend arrived and I was due to meet up with my partner, I had no choice but to just simply close my eyes and pick one of the T-shirts at random to present it as the real deal. My partner would never know whether the gift was genuine, signed, White Stripes original, or a worthless forgery. And unfortunately, neither would I. So, Father Simon, I need your forgiveness, not from my partner, who frankly I couldn't give a stuff about.
Okay. Yeah.
As the selfishness, I'm ashamed to report, continued unabated. After this, and we parted company shortly afterwards.
Right.
Now, the forgiveness I seek is from Jack and Meg, of course, to whom I hereby apologise unreservedly for the wicked deed of forging their signatures when they were at the height of their fame. I still work in the film industry, but I no longer ask for autographs or fraternise with the talent due to the shame I still feel for my wicked deed of fakery, which I've carried with me as a terrible secret for many, many years. This is from Sam, who's still in the film industry, but passed off a White Stripes T-shirt, or is actually wearing himself a White Stripes T-shirt with fake signatures on. Sister Bobby, what are you saying here?
What a lovely insight into lovely Jack, who's, wants to see his fans. That's really lovely. It's just kind of naive and childlike. Does that make sense?
Yes, just wanting to see all his fans
yeah,
come
and
in.
everyone is excited coming in, and he captures that. And of course, he goes out to meet them on stage, and it kind of helps, I'm sure. And Sam, you know the rules. You're not meant to kind of be uncool and go and do this. I mean, we all know the rules, don't you? If you're crewing or anything, you just go hi and you treat them like anybody else. But I do forgive you just about for getting the signature.
I always have to say to Bobby, don't ask me for an autograph again, Bobby, because it's just embarrassing. We've all got jobs to do.
Listen, I have to make some money somehow on the online auctions. Anyway, what
That's right, because they go for a fortune.
Yeah, what I'm going to say, so what I'm not going to forgive you for, I'm not going to forgive you for forging the signature, because basically you have diluted the integrity of the signature of your hero. So you are not forgiven for that, and you should know better.
Brother Matthew.
Yes, there were a few twists and turns there, but I am going to forgive because this girlfriend sounds like a bad sort, bad seed, best off without her, sounds to me very selfish. Everything was about her, and here's hoping you got the authentic T-shirt.
No way of telling.
No way of knowing, though. So isn't that a bit like life? In a funny way. And for that, I think we've all learned a valuable lesson, and so I'm going to forgive.
This is the place where penitents seek our pardon for their sins. Simon Mayo's Confessions Podcast.
Dear Father Simon and the underlings, That's you guys.
Okay.
Looking difficult for Andrew already. Your recent confession involving the Eurostar station in Belgium and an incident with a rogue wheelchair on a travelator reminded me of my own travelator-related tale from about 5 years ago. I think, does everyone know a travelator?
Yes.
You know, the flat escalator.
The things that you're
Yeah.
supposed to walk along, but some people inexplicably decide to stand on.
They're allowed to stand. You're
Not
wrong.
allowed.
You are
wrong.
allowed, but, it'd be nice if you just got
Yes.
on with it.
Please.
Anyway, this is from about 5 years ago. I thought now was the time to write in and seek absolution for my actions or lack thereof. The travelator in question was the one at my local orange-coloured supermarket in Cardiff. What?
I know that. Yeah.
Which is split into two.
Yeah. I think I might know that one.
Do you think? Okay, well, let's go further into our description. I think they're just reorganising their management if you're listening to the news at 5. For anyone who has never used one of these at a supermarket, they can be a bit frustrating because the trolley wheels will lock in place once you put the trolley on the travelator. Yes, I think we've all
right,
done that.
yep.
Clearly, this makes sense from a safety point of view, as otherwise the trolley might roll back down the travelator, but it does make for an irritatingly slow journey between the floors. It can be especially annoying if you don't even have a trolley, because the travelator itself is narrow, and so there isn't room to walk around any other shoppers with trolleys who may be locked in place in front of you. Anyway, on this particular Sunday morning, the supermarket was quiet, and I decided to go up to the upper floor to look for some article of clothing or other. I wheeled my trolley onto the travelator and began the slow, oh so slow descent upstairs. It was then I noticed that about 20 feet ahead of me were 4 others, a boy and a girl, each around 10, a woman who I assumed was their mother, and an older woman in her late 60s or early 70s, presumably the children's grandmother. It looked like the mother had been having one of those weekends, because she and the trolley were some distance ahead of the other 3. Thank you very much. I'm off and doing some shopping. And although the kids were play fighting, she was doing everything she could to ignore them completely and was leaving them in the hands of their grandmother. As the mother reached the upper floor and disappeared swiftly down one of the aisles, I noticed the grandmother was unsuccessfully trying to get the 2 kids to calm down. At this point, the boy pushed the girl a bit harder than he probably intended, and she stumbled backwards into the grandmother, who probably lost her balance and fell onto the travelator. Now, obviously, I would have gone up to try and help her if I could have, but as I said, the travelator was narrow, and I wasn't able to get round my trolley to reach her. And that was when I realised there was a problem. As the old woman reached the top of the travelator and arrived at the upper floor, it became apparent that she couldn't get back to her feet. She was still lying horizontally, her daughter had disappeared down one of the aisles, and the kids were still play fighting off to one side, whilst me and my trolley were slowly being carried towards this elderly woman who was now sprawled across the travelator.
Oh, no.
It was at this point I started to panic. I was about 15 feet away from the woman. I couldn't get past my trolley to help her. All I could do was shout, "Could someone move the old woman, please?"
What?
Someone really needs to move the old woman. She's
Right.
there. Look, there, old woman falling down. Someone move her. Kids didn't pay any attention. And the big I wish I had my loud hailer at this point, because that's what I'd have needed. Kids didn't pay any attention, and the big supermarket was quiet. So either no one else was near enough to hear, or they didn't realise what was happening, because no one came. By now, I'm less than 10 feet from the top, so this is all in slow motion now.
Yeah.
"I'm going to run over her!" I'm shouting. "I don't want to run over her, but I'm going to unless someone helps. I'm going to run over her very shortly."
Here it comes.
Still no one came. I could see the front of my trolley inching towards the elderly lady's horizontal form. I got about 2 feet away and realised there was nothing left to do but apologise. So in a much calmer voice I said, "Well, I'm going to run over you now, sorry."
Right.
And with that, the front wheels of my trolley reached the top of the travelator and the woman who lay just beyond it. Thankfully, there wasn't much in my trolley at that stage, and of course, once the front and then back wheels had trundled over her,
Really?
they were no longer locked in place, so I was sort of able to lever the trolley over the woman while stepping over her myself, but I did indeed run her over. But I apologised in advance so I think that makes it okay. There was no apparent injury. I was then able to put my trolley to one side and help her back to her feet, and I must say she seemed to take the whole thing very well, considering she'd just been the victim of the world's slowest running over of all time. But despite that, I can't imagine she felt much dignity by the time she got home later that morning. So the forgiveness is obviously from that elderly woman, whose name I never learnt for embarrassing her in the way that I did. I'm not sure exactly what I could have done to avoid the collision, and at least she wasn't hurt, but I can't help feeling kind of bad about the whole thing looking back. Maybe if your collective can forgive me, I'll finally be able to move on. Here's hoping. Well, my favourite part of that whole confession is, of course, in a much calmer voice, well, I'm sorry, I'm going to run you over now. Because it was exactly... What else could he do? The whole thing was in slow motion, and it was a light trolley, but clearly slightly upsetting, I would have thought. Let's see what the Bobster makes of that.
Well, it's really simple. There's a stop button halfway up. What you should have said, I said it clearly, is stop the travelator. You're kind of long-winded. Can someone move the old lady? He wasn't clear enough. If you'd just said stop the travelator, and shouted it, some member of the staff would have understood, and they'd have pressed the stop button at the top, at the bottom, or halfway up. So that's what you could have done. Also, Andrew, why didn't you jump in the trolley and then jump out again? You climb in and then you climb out because the trolley's fixed. It's absolutely fine. You get in it and then you end up on the other side of it.
No, I don't think you. I think you might topple.
No,
I'm not sure about that.
Don't do it in normal circumstances, but faced with running a lovely, lovely lady over, you get in it, then you step out, you run, because of course the trolley's moving so slow behind you, you slide the old lady out of the way, right, because she might need to lay down for a bit still, so you can't stand her up straight away, and then you'll be fine. Also, Andrew, you don't even care, you're not even sorry. You're not forgiven.
Oh, I think that's unnecessarily harsh, myself.
Well, yeah, I mean, this getting into the shopping trolley and then it's a bit too Indiana Jones for me. I'm not doing that.
We're not in the movies now, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not clambering over and then possibly falling down. You just said travelator. And exactly, there is a design flaw in this travelator. If there isn't a button, there needs to be a button that you press, and that stops the travelator. I have a massive problem with these travelator things as well, in that I am forced to stand there behind people with their trolleys on this. Why can't they just use the lift? That's what I ask. And so for that reason, I am going to forgive, just because I'm not clambering in and out of a trolley, no matter
just
how many old women
is drawing attention to herself
at the top of my travelator.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast.
That was Andrew's superbly named confession, Good Golly This Trolley, which prompted this reaction on the People's Verdict. Simon, I've never laughed and shrieked at a confession in equal measure. I forgive, as Bobby doesn't know if the man doing the running over had mobility issues, therefore could jump in the trolley. I'm only 32, but in the wrong trousers, I certainly couldn't do it.
No, I'm with you
You're
there.
right.
It's true, because if you are in the wrong trousers, there are so many things that you can't do. And presumably the wrong skirt. You would just think, I can't do that. I'm in the wrong skirt.
Yeah, or even the wrong top.
What?
In what way does the wrong top limit your mobility?
Well, if you...
Oh, I see. Yes, I've got it in my head now.
You see what I mean? It's you
what?
You can
Yes.
get overflow. If there's a dynamic, Imagine like dynamic and your upper, your string
Yes.
vest, if
Okay,
there
we've
was
done
enough of it to hold everything down in place. Is that right
cool.
for tea time?
That's not getting in.
Confessions at bbc.co.uk. It's not tea time, it's any time on the podcast. Before we go, another treat from the confessional crypt. This week has been requested by Hilary Allen, Will Roney, Sheila Fleming and Tess Herbert. All right, Tess. It involves a wheelie bin and a whiskey lorry. And here's the confession we called Wheelie Saying Something.
The Confessions podcast.
Dear Father Simon and the Collective, I listen to the confession slot every day on my way home from work, and I laugh and gasp with horror, sometimes forgive, sometimes don't, but always I admire the bravery of your congregation as they enter the confessional and seek redemption from yourselves and your kind, lovely, intelligent, rational, forgiving listeners. I think Sally's worried about this. And then I think, well, who am I to judge? Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone, the Bible teaches us. And so it is with guilt and fear I approach the Radio 2 Drive Time Collective and seek forgiveness for a misdemeanour whose burden of guilt I have carried for too long. I live in the northeast of Scotland, in a rural spot, which is also the home of many of our finest malt whiskies. I have lived here all my life, and I think it's fair to say a good proportion of the population are in some way connected to the Scotch whisky industry. either directly or through one of the subsidiary industries like transport, farming or coppersmiths. My house at the time of this incident was up a rough track of a narrow country road that led to a famous distillery, and as such the big tanker lorries that delivered the grain, collected the whiskey and all the byproducts were going past my road end many times a day, and at that time they were very distinctive for their bright coloured livery. My squeeze at the time, Father Simon, worked for the transport company that did the delivering and fetching, so he was often driving past my road in the course of his work. The incident in question happened one beautiful summer's day, just after I'd returned from a hard day's work showing our lovely visitors around another famous distillery in the region. I was very hot, so I decided to change into a floaty summer dress, as you do when the sun is shining. Is that what you do, Bobby?
Always.
Always, thank you. It was also a Wednesday night, which meant I had to pull our wheelie bin to the end of our track in order for it to be collected the next day. Feeling all summery, I texted my squeeze and asked him if he'd like to call in past the house after work, to which he replied he was just at the distillery by my house collecting whiskey. I decided to go to the end of the road and give him a wave as he drove past. So I collected the wheelie bin, walked to the end of the road and waited for him to come past. Sure enough, within minutes, I could see the distinctive colour of the lorry approaching down the road. Now, maybe it was the heat. I don't know, but I decided I'd give him a bit more than a wave. So I popped myself up on top of the wheelie bin, and then, and there's no other way to describe it really, I pulled down the strapless top of my dress. Just as the lorry passed, I threw my arms aloft, threw out a big smile and bared all to the lorry and the rest of the hometown. What I heard next will live with me forever, Father Simon. The blood-curdling screech of brakes followed by the crunch of 40 tons of Arctic lorry bearing our precious whiskey, leaving the road and coming adrift in the field. Horrified, I jumped off the wheelie bin, ran to have a look at the scene of devastation unfolding at the end of my track, just taking time to haul up my dress and cover myself, obviously. To my horror and devastation, it wasn't the cheery face of my squeeze that greeted me. Instead, it was the shocked and terrified face of a gentleman quite near to retirement, unless he'd aged 50 years in the last few minutes. Yes, you guessed it, my dear friends, I'd flashed the wrong lorry. So I obviously need to seek an awful lot, a lorry load of forgiveness, please, Father Simon. Firstly, and obviously, from that darling man who never once grasped me to the authorities, but also from the whiskey company, get this, whose lorry I trashed, and for the 22,000 litres of whiskey that never made it to the destination. Also, I suppose, from the people at the end of this supply chain for the loss of their precious nectar. And finally, from my then squeeze, who never got his little wave as he drove past, but instead was held up for about 2 hours whilst they pulled the other lorry out of the field.
Brilliant.
How about that? See, she was just trying to be friendly, but...
Very friendly.
It's kind of distracting, I suppose, is what you could say. That guy thinking, I'm just making a little delivery. Oh, I say, as they say in the Northeast. So let's see what Sister Rebecca
like
makes
in all
of
these things,
that.
I think she should have waited until she saw the whites of his eyes until she did the deed.
that must have
Actually, I
been
think she
wiser.
obviously went too early. But I think the thought behind it was very sweet, wasn't it? Because obviously it was meant for her squeeze. I'm sure that the whiskey company would have been covered by insurance. So I'm going to argue that there was no harm done, actually. And the guy who was driving probably had quite a
Story
different,
to tell.
nice day and a good anecdote to tell. Exactly. So I'm going to forgive.
Very tolerant, very understanding. Now, the voice of travel, though, is going to come... I know she's going to come out all austere and say that's not the right way to behave in front of traffic.
Well, the thing is, I understand the situation. Also, it's all good intention, to cheer the squeeze on. That's fine, like. However, I think I'm thinking of it. What amazed me is she managed to sit on top of the wheelie bin. I never would have been able to get up there without
That's an
falling
interesting
off.
point. I
Yes,
mean,
it is.
this is really quite a display that was happening.
I thought she was going to do a Marilyn Monroe, but she didn't. So what I would say is intentions were good. However, this is a perfect example of good intentions going bad.
Yes.
I am really sorry about that much whiskey going lost. And also, what a lovely man to say, I crashed my lorry and it was nobody's fault. It wasn't that lady who flashed me. I mean, she could have been, what a great, lovely man. And because he forgave her, I think I have to say, I have to forgive her too.
Brother Michael.
I can't stop smiling, imagining the driver's face as he drove past. What the? And no wonder he careered off the road. But how much whiskey was lost?
22,000 litres.
litres.
It's a lot, isn't it?
Of whiskey. That is a lot of whiskey. But I have to, I think, agree with Rebecca as well. This chap, I'm sure, has a story to tell, which I'm sure he dines out on this day. I think Sally said he was nearing retirement. What a way to go out. Yeah, I've got to forgive.
Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast.
It has a real innocence with catastrophic effect, but
Well,
it's really
innocence.
innocent.
I mean, she's flashing a truck driver.
Yeah, but no, herself. She doesn't mean she's not flashing anyone. She's flashing her boyfriend.
Yeah.
Well, so she thought.
Yes, so she thought.
That was your confession from the crypt this week, featuring at the end Sister Bobby, Rebecca, and that was Mike Williams.
Yes.
In there. But it was a big favourite,
It was, yes.
even though you weren't on it.
No, I mean, obviously, it was great, but I wasn't on it.
Well, obviously it suffered from that. If you have a request for a vintage confession, send over all the details you can remember, please, to confessions@bbc.co.uk, and we'll do our best to dig it out of the crypt. This week, Sister Bobby, you forgave 1. You did not forgive 2. You were off on Monday, so only 3 marks are applicable, but this is a new tough week as far as you're concerned. You're on 7.5 forgives, 6.5 not forgives.
That's not bad, is it?
And Matt, you forgave everyone again, being the beret-wearing,
Liberal,
cape-wearing,
anything goes,
wearing sandals.
blue sausage.
So you're 14 forgives and 1 not forgives. That's your total. If you made it to the end of the last podcast, you had to tweet, "Who on earth has Friday clothes?" And thanks to Kate who gets the sticker, and Mr. Payne, Catherine, Sam, James, Heidi, Jake, and loads more who did say that but don't get the sticker. This week's code phrase is, "I'm sorry, but I'm going to run over you now," which was one of our favourite lines.
Yeah.
Remember to subscribe to the podcast. Don't forget you can hear our whole radio show live every weekday, and it's a joy to be listening and being part of this team for 2 hours, Monday to Friday. Thanks very much indeed. Goodbye, Matt.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, Bobby.
Goodbye.
The Confessions podcast. Go in peace.